Okay, so we're going to get started today with exercise 220. It's a bit of a break from working on your artist retreat in that we're going to start working on lights today. And I will be honest and say that I think the thing that people have the most fun with in V-Ray is lighting and doing night renders. We're not quite at the stage where we're really going to be able to do quality night renders just yet, but we're getting there. And so today's really about learning how lights work, getting ready to be able to put them into your scene and actually start to light the interiors. From here, we will go toward an interior day render. So we'll put the lights into your scene next class and actually create a render that's inside with supplemental lighting. And then we'll move into the night, where it's actually we switch into nighttime renderings. So today is going to be about how do we create lights, how do we work with lights, and I'm going to focus on two primary types of lights. These are V-Ray lights, to be specific. One is a spotlight and one is a point light. There are a number of different types of lights that are available in V-Ray. It's hard to teach them all in one setting, so I try to break them up and then I'll pull in some other light types a little bit later on, but we'll start with the two most basic, which are a spotlight and a point light. Now, when it comes to actually doing lighting in V-Ray, there's a couple things that are kind of essential that we need to create. The first thing is we need to create the fixture, or the geometry that actually holds the light itself. So if you look in this room, for example, we've got these ugly fluorescent lights above our heads, and when the lights are on, there is some kind of a frame that holds a lens, and we can visually see that light. There is also the light that's being cast down on all of us. And so when we do lighting in Rhino and V-Ray, we're actually building two separate things. One thing we're building is the fixture, and the other thing we're assigning is the V-Ray light that casts the light in the scene. So there's two different parts. We're going to start with building the fixture itself first, and then we'll get into the V-Ray light and the V-Ray light settings. So I have a brand new Rhino file open. It should be in the large objects, feet and inches template. Let me double check here. Perfect. And so in this, I need to actually create the fixture, the thing that holds the light in the first place, or the thing that holds the light bulb. I'm going to do something that's a very simple place to start today. My hope is that you'll embellish it, you'll work with it, you'll think about it a little bit more, but I'll show you several different styles of lights. So the first one that I'm going to do is a recessed light in the ceiling, and I'll do a round like a can light. So nothing particularly fancy, it would be recessed, it would be up on the ceiling, etc. So I need to make the geometry that holds the light first. So if I think about that, I could start with one of my standard primitives here. I'm going to use this one, which is the tube setup. I'll click on that. I'm going to start with my tube at 0, 0. There it is. It's going to ask me the radius, the outer radius. So let's say this is a 6-inch can light, so my radius would be 3 inches. There it is. Then it's going to ask for the thickness of the wall, which would be essentially the trim. So we'll do that maybe at, let's see here. Let's do 3.75 inches. And then it's going to ask me for the height of this little piece. Now, because this is going to end up mounting on the ceiling, I'm actually building it into the negative. So I'm going down from 0, 0, 0 instead of going up. I could flip it over afterward, but I'm going to go down. Let's go down by, I don't know, negative 0.25 inches. Like that. Oh, I can't see it. So let's go into my options here. In OpenGL, I'm going to turn off that GPU tessellation, and now I can see it. If I look at it in shaded mode, there we go, we can kind of see it. So that's the trim. That's the ring of the trim, so to speak. Now, I could get a little bit more fancy about it. I could say that, you know what, instead of having it be just a square like that, I could draw out that I want the profile to, let's say, go to have some baffles in it. Let me turn on ortho for a second here. And then we'll go over, let's see here. let's go. Okay, so let's say I did that. And then let me fillet this. Let's do... We'll do it like that. I could use this as a profile that I could then move over. Oops. Snap here. Come on. Let me do a rotate 3D on this. So it's a matter of what you want to do in terms of complexity. But I could take, and instead of having something simple, I could sweep that around the rail, which would increase the complexity of the little baffles or whatever. You get the idea. So I can keep adding levels of detail to this. But again, it doesn't really matter. I could have stuck with just the simple light. I'm just showing you that your level of complexity can improve as you go along, which is part of what adds to the realism of these lights in the first place. So I have that, which includes its little trim piece. The next thing I need is the bulb. We'd see a little bit of a bulb in here. And in this day and age, you're seeing a lot more of the bulb being LED, so there's some kind of a lens that goes across as opposed to an actual light bulb that you would screw in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I could do it just as a flat surface. I can also do it as a slight ellipsoid. So if I go into my primitives here, I can choose this one, this ellipsoid. My ellipsoid center is still going to be at 0, 0. There it is. My end of first axis would be out to that point. Let me turn on my quadrant snap. There we go. My second axis would be right there. And then this is just the thickness of the bulb. How far does it stick down? So let's do it, I don't know, at 1/8. It's an ellipsoid. It's underneath the cube here. It's that one. And so we can see that it has a slight little bit of an arc to it on this side. I don't need the whole arc, though. I don't need it on the back side. I'd rather keep that flat. So I'll select the curve that I had here, and I'll trim the back half off. At least I hope I'll trim the back half off. Oops, it doesn't like me. I'll try that one more time. Let me use this as a trim. There we go. So I'm just going down with it. So as I look at this light, I need to organize it. I'm going to use it as a block. So this fixture is going to be a block. So let me go ahead and rename my layers and get organized here. My first layer, we'll call it can light -6. And then I'll have a sublayer for trim, C6 trim. And I'll have a sublayer for C6 lens or light or whatever. And so I'll take the trim and we'll put that on the trim layer. I'll take the bulb itself and I'll put that on the lens layer. There it is. And then the rest of these layers don't matter. So we'll go ahead and select them all. I'll hold down Shift while I select them all, and then I'll delete them. So I'm really trying to be organized about how I'm looking at this. So the next piece would be to go ahead and assign materials. So we'll open my V-Ray asset editor here. I'm going to be in the materials section, and let's find a material. I'm going to go ahead and go with plastic, and we'll do maybe a white plastic or something. There we go. There's a white plastic. We'll drop that over here. I'm going to right-click on plastic here and say Apply to Layer. It's going to go on the trim layer. And so now if I were to render this, we'd get the white plastic trim. That's good. But this, the lens of the bulb, if I look at that and the light was on, I'd want to see that it's glowing somehow. So if you look up at the light there, it's glowing. There's a difference between the physical object that is the light and the V-Ray light that's actually casting light in your scene. And this is one of those things that is difficult for you guys to understand initially, in that the fixture is separate from the V-Ray light. So in the fixture, I still need to make it look like this lens is actually shining or is on. The light is on. And I'm going to do that using a special kind of material called an emissive material. And I have a little tutorial written up. If you're in exercise 220 here, there's a link to it. It's right here, V-Ray 8.15 emissive material. It's right here. And so we're going to go ahead and create that emissive material. I'm going to come back and reference these numbers because I can't memorize them. So I'll be back to look at this in just a second. But we're going to come over here, we're going to open the V-Ray asset editor, and we're actually going to create a brand new material. So I'm going to click on the new material button. Let's see, I think it's this one. There we go. And we're going to create a new emissive. So previously we've always done generic. This time we're creating a new emissive material. So I'll click on that. It's called emissive. I could rename this if I wanted to be light bulb or something like that. And you can already see that in the little preview here, it kind of looks like it's glowing a little bit. And that's really what we're after. So let's go in and adjust some of the settings. So I've created the material, I've called it light bulb, then I'm going to hit the little toggle on the right here to open the material properties. I can actually close the material library here and just work with the properties. And I need to adjust some of the settings. So these settings here correspond to some of the settings that I have online. So I have an emissive color at 200, 161, and 82. So I'm going to jump back over into here, and my color, I'm going to click on the color. And right now, if I tried to type in 200 in the R value, it's not going to let me. And that's because my color scheme here is in a range of 0 to 1. I can change it, however, to 0 to 255. So it's just the scale with which it's working. So now I can actually type in 200, 161, and 82. It ends up being kind of a goldish color, like that. So it's not the most exciting color yet, but it provides the right color light long term. It'll glow the right shade of yellow. So now that I have that, I can go ahead and close it. And the next thing down is the emissive transparency. So right here, I'm going to click on that square. And the emissive transparency, I'm going to switch to 100, 100, 100. And so I've gone to 100s, and I'll go ahead and close that. So instead of being black, it's kind of a gray. So that gets me through the emissive drawer. And let me see. This may be something that's a little bit different because, yep, so this is the new version of V-Ray. So things change a little bit. So you can ignore the diffuse color and the diffuse transparency for right now. Okay? So I have those. The last piece of this is a value for intensity. So it's still here under the emissive and intensity. This value, the higher you make this value, the stronger the light's going to be. So right now it's at 1, but if I switch to 10, for example, we're going to see the light start to and cast light into the scene, and you can actually see it kind of glowing out there. We're going to increase it all the way to 100, which is going to seem excessive in its preview state, but will actually turn out pretty well long term. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that at 100. It's called light bulb. I need to apply that to the material. So I'm going to go to apply to layer, and it's going to be the lens. It's going to be that. So now if I were to look at it here and do a little render, you can see a little bit of the light starting to glow. You can see it around the edges. It's a little bit yellow in color, which is our purpose. So it's glowing. So we now have the light fixture ready to install into a scene. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'll go to File and then Save. And let's put it into today's folder. Bear with me for a second. So that's can light 6. I'll go ahead and click on save. There it is. And I need to bring it into a night scene. We will get to setting up a night scene, but I'm not going to make you guys do it. I have a sample for you. So if you pull up exercise 220, about halfway down under part 2, there's download a sample night environment to try out your light blocks. So this is already set up for you, so you don't have to create anything. If you click on it and download it, when you go to open it, maybe. There we go. Obviously, the file's from last semester, which is why there's unsupported V-Ray materials in it. Okay, so what it is it's a little wall, a little roof that's kind of floating there, and it gives us a place to put our lights and try them out. If I do a render of this scene, it should show up kind of like a dark background. There's a little bit of shadow, as if there was maybe a moon, but it's mostly black. On the screen, it looks really, really black. But for our purposes, it's enough to kind of test out our lights and make sure that we like them. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in that can light, and I want to stick it on the ceiling here. But I need some guides for where it's going to go. So I'm going to draw a little line that goes across diagonally on that ceiling so I can snap right to the middle. It'll make it easy to bring it in. I'll turn on my midpoint snap. I'll go to Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance. So it's really important to note here that I made the geometry in a file and I saved it, and then I'm bringing that geometry of the light into the scene as a block reference. So I'm bringing it in right now, and I'm going to go find the one that I just created. There it is. We'll go ahead and say open. Perfect. I want to use it as a linked block definition and my layer style as reference. I'll say OK. I'll say OK. Let me replace all existing materials. And when I put it in, I'm going to stick it right to that light right there. So now that I have the light fixture in the scene, I could perform a render. And if I did it correctly, there will be, you always have to wait for things to render out, there'll be a little bit of speckling, and I'll be able to see right here, yep, there's the light, it's in the scene. But it's not nearly enough light to actually be lighting the scene, to know that there's enough light in the scene and to mimic real light. So this is where a V-Ray light comes in. So this is the geometry that holds the light. Now we need to build the V-Ray light itself. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this where it is, and I'm going to come up to the V-Ray toolbar right here, and I'm going to choose a spotlight. It's the third one over, right there. And when I create the spotlight, the first thing that it asks for is the base of the cone. So I'll snap right to that center. Hopefully I still have midpoint snap on. Come on. Doing such a nice job of letting me snap there. There it is, midpoint. And then it's going to ask me for the radius of the light. So I want the radius to be 1 foot, or the diameter to be 2 feet. So I'll go ahead and type in 1 foot, and then I'll press enter. And then I want my height, I want my light itself to be going so that it's shining down. And sometimes it's hard to get it to actually snap to be going down, so it may be easier to just do it in one of your side views. So I'm doing it here, and I want the height here to be 1 foot. So I set those as the same. The radius and the height are identical here. 1 foot radius, 1 foot height. And we'll go ahead and place it in like that. So this now, this object, is my V-Ray light. That's going to be lighting the scene itself. There's a few rules for this light. Number one, the origin of the light, so this point up here, can't be intersecting or contained within any objects. So I need to move it down so that it's below all my geometry. So you see it doesn't actually interfere with any of my geometry. I can move it to be really, really close to my geometry, but it can't be there, where it's inside, because then this light would be shining on the inside of my light fixture. So I need it to be outside. So we're going to make sure that it's down and outside of all my geometry, like that. And then we need to work through the properties for this particular light. So when I click on the light itself, there it is, there are, if I go over to my properties, there are light properties. So these light properties, we have a variety of settings here that are available. You can also see it in your V-Ray editor, which is right there, which gives you additional options for the light itself. So we're going to work on editing the light inside of the V-Ray asset editor rather than just here, because it gives us more options than what are just available here. So if I select the light, I can click on the Edit in V-Ray Light Editor. There it is. So we're in the Asset Editor. There's my V-Ray Spotlight. Just as before, I can rename these so that I have individual light names, which may, if you imagine having 20 different spotlights, it may help you to say living room light, kitchen light, that sort of thing. For right now, it can stay Spotlight. I only have one, so it doesn't matter. And so now we're going to look at a few of the settings. And so the first thing is the color of the light. It's currently set for white. If we want the color to be a little bit more yellow, to mimic kind of incandescent traditional light, we're going to change that color. And again, I'm going to change my range to be 0 to 255 here. And it's going to be 255, 214, and 170, like that, which is a little bit more of a light pale yellowy brown. And that'll help in the overall light. So we'll go ahead and set that. So that's my color. And then the next one that's really important is this units. So there are several different unit types to control the intensity of the V-Ray light. Most of you will be most familiar with radiant watts or power right here. This is like the wattage of a bulb. And most people kind of have a general idea of, oh, it's a 40-watt light bulb or it's a 60-watt light bulb in terms of understanding how bright a light would be. And so I think you'll have the easiest time setting it up based on that. So I would encourage you to change to radiant power right there. And then you change the intensity to be what type of bulb. So a 60-watt bulb, you would put 60 there in its intensity. As we come down here a little bit further, under decay, instead of linear decay, we're going to do inverse square. So we have decay set for inverse square. Good. All of those options should be set now for us. We can go back to our original scene. There it is. Let me switch to, I have a saved view to help the render here. Render 1, so we can kind of see the whole scene. And I'll go ahead and press the render button. And I love it when I do that and nothing shows up, right? Come on. There it is. And so you can immediately tell that I have light casting down on the screen. Unfortunately, you can't see it quite as well as I can. There's a little bit of an arc here based on the distance of the light from the wall that's casting the light right there. Now, I can change this by adjusting the light settings itself. So for you guys to see this a little bit better, I might change the intensity here. So I go back into my V-Ray and I'd say, okay, let's change this to 120. And hopefully you guys will be able to see it a little better. I'll go ahead and go back and render. And so my light just got a little bit stronger, so hopefully you can see this a little bit better. And there we go. So now you can see that arc on the wall here a little bit better. So I can change what this does. Let me create a few more spotlights to help illustrate this. So this first one is kind of your generic light. It works pretty nicely for an interior light. I'm happy with it. I'm going to create some layers so that I can hide these for a second. And let me change object layer. We'll turn off that one. I'm going to create another spotlight. So go back to my spotlight tool. And this time I'm going to change the diameter. So the radius last time was at 1 foot. I'll do the radius this time at, I don't know, let's do it at 4 inches. And I'm going to set my height at the same height. So we'll do 1 foot of height. There it is. Same rules. I have to move this so that it doesn't intersect any object. And then we'll go back and adjust my light properties. So we'll go in my V-Ray asset editor here. It's now the V-Ray Spotlight 1. Same settings. It's 255, 214, and 170. This is a set of numbers I actually have memorized. There it is. My units are going to be in radiant power. I'm going to keep them at 120 so that you guys can see it there. And my decay is going to be inverse square. So I've gone through and adjusted the options. Let's see what happens in the render. So at this point, I can go ahead and open up that render again. And instead of having the nice arc, I've focused the beam of light so that it's now very intense as more of a spotlight down onto the floor, because the geometry of the V-Ray light has changed. So I've shrunk that diameter down, kept the height the same. So the relationship of the diameter or the radius, whatever you want to refer to, and the height controls what's happening with the spotlight. So you can see there that it's shining directly down on the floor. I'm getting no fall on the wall itself. There's still ambient reflected light from that spot, but it's acting much more like a true spotlight would be. The inverse of that would be to create a light that is more. So let's do a radius of 2 feet and a height of 1 foot. We'll move it. Same settings. There it is. It's Spotlight 2, 255, 214, and 170 as my color. Watts. Same watt settings and my inverse square decay. Perfect. And now when I jump back and I render this, the light is going to be far more diffuse. It's the opposite effect. So I'm going to end up with very little light or arc on the wall. That arc is going to be much, much higher than it was in the original one. And so now it's a very kind of diffuse broad light. So I've changed what the lighting conditions are based on the geometry of the V-Ray light. Does that kind of make sense? So most of the time, the 1-to-1 rule is a pretty safe bet. You stick with that and you're going to generally be okay. Okay, so I've done that and I've gone through those types of lights. Now, if I wanted to change and I wanted to do a light that maybe was a lamp, you know, let's say a floor lamp or something, I could make that kind of a light. So I'm going to go ahead and go into V-Ray and I'll create a new light, a new document. Large object inches. There it is. Now I need to build the geometry for this light. So I'd start with maybe a cylinder here. We'll start at 0, 0. Oops. Let's do a diameter of 1 foot, a height of 1.25 inches there. Let's switch this over into shaded so we can kind of see it. All right, let's do another one. Turn on my center snap. All right, we'll do a diameter of 1 inch and a height of, I don't know, 4 feet. I'm sure you guys can come up with better looking geometry than what I'm doing, okay? This is just purely the example. So let me come in here to the cylinder again. Let me make sure I'm snapping to the center. There it is. Let's say my diameter is going to be, you know what, let's make it slope instead of being a perfect cylinder. We'll do this. All right, so my diameter, we'll do it at 10 inches. And we'll do this at 1 foot, and then we'll do it at 8 inches. So it has a little bit of a slope to it. I'm going to move this down also so that the the post and the lampshade intersect a little bit. So let me move this vertically by maybe 4 inches. There we go. I'm going to take the shade itself and I'll explode it so that I can delete the top and the bottom like that. So I just built out the little floor lamp. Okay, again, the geometry of this doesn't matter. You guys can make something beautiful. You don't need to make something as simple as I'm making. So once again, I have to set up my layers to bring it in as a block. So we'll call this one, I don't know, floor lamp. We'll make a sublayer for shade. We'll make a sublayer for stand. And that's probably sufficient. Now in this case, because I put a lampshade on this, we're not actually seeing the bulb inside. It's being covered up by the lampshade. So I'm not going to worry about building the light bulb itself and doing an emissive material. It's not really necessary because it's hidden by the lampshade. So we're going to leave it with just those. So first thing I need is the stand needs to go on the stand layer. Sorry, wrong layer. Change object layer. There it is. The shade needs to go on the shade layer. Perfect. So I have the shade on the shade layer, the stand on the stand layer. We need to assign some materials. We'll open that material drawer up. Let's see if we can find a metal for the lamp. Sure, that one looks kind of interesting. We'll right-click and say Apply to Layer, and it's going to be on the stand layer. So that's now been applied to the stand layer. Now, the shade is a bit trickier. So since we're in the new V-Ray, I'm going to give a shot at some of their fabric materials and see if that will work nicely as a shade. I can't promise that it's going to work. In the old version of V-Ray, it was better just to create a semi-transparent kind of tannish material and have it work. So I'm going to give this a shot and see if it works. And if it doesn't, I'll go back to the old way because I think it has improved. So I'm going to look here under fabric, and I'm going to pick a fabric for the lampshade. Let's see here. Well, that one's kind of ugly. What's that one look like? Well, that's a mesh. That's not going to be good. How about that one? Yeah, that looks nice. Okay, so I'm going to use that one. I'll right-click on it and say Apply to Layer, and we're going to put it on the shade layer. There it is. By the way, there is one, like I've loaded some materials that I didn't end up using here. If you want to clean up your file, you can click this little broom looking icon, which will get rid of any materials that aren't actually assigned. So I can get rid of those materials that I didn't assign. Sometimes that's useful when you have 20 materials and you don't need them all. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've done that. It's possible that I might have to adjust the opacity of this material a little bit, so that the light shines through. We're going to give it a shot and see what happens. Okay, so I have that set up. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'll go to File and then Save, and we'll call this Floor Lamp. And we'll save. And then we're going to bring it over into that same Rhino file, this one. And for our purposes, I'm going to go ahead and take these two and put them on a new layer, just so we're not being confused by some of these other layers. There we go. And so I'm going to bring in the floor lamp. So I'll go to Edit and then Blocks, Insert Block Instance. And I'm going to go find that floor lamp. There it is. It's a linked file as a reference layer type. And we'll drop it here onto the ground. I used that corner just so that I could place it somewhere. I'll switch into the top view and we'll adjust it a little bit. Let's move it so that it's close to the wall but not intersecting the wall. So there it is. At this point, I don't have a light installed just yet. So I need to install a light into this light fixture so that we see what the light looks like. And so I could do a spotlight like I did last time, but remember, a spotlight originates at a point and shines all in one direction. Well, in this case, my point is right here, and I need it to kind of go up, it needs to go down, it needs to go out. So this is a perfect opportunity to use something called a point light. And so if you come over here, we did spotlight before. If we come over 2 more, we get to point light. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the point light tool. Be careful that you're not picking the sun tool here. We're using just the point light right here. And it's going to ask for a location. I'm going to snap it right to the top of this. Let me turn on my center snap, and I'll snap it right to there. It is currently intersecting that top though, so I still need to move it up by maybe 1 inch. So it's floating there. So there it is. One of the challenges with point lights is as you zoom in, they stay the same size. They don't ever get bigger. So picking them sometimes can be a little challenging. I'll just warn you about that ahead of time. So I have that selected. I'm going to once again go over to my properties, click on the light properties, and then go to Edit in V-Ray Asset Editor. So there it is. There's my V-Ray. They call it an Omni light here. I need to work through the same settings. So first off is going to be the color, 255, 214, and 170. There we go. I have my color set. My intensity, we'll leave it, let's do it at 120. My units are going to be in radiant power or watts. My decay is already set for inverse square. So all of that's good. The rest of that's fine. Perfect. So I have that one set up. We'll go ahead and step back. Let me go to my set view, render 1, and we'll give this a render. Like I said, on this one, I'm not sure whether the shade is going to turn out the way we want it to or not. Okay, so you can see here that our light is casting light up through the open end of the shade and down through the lower end of the shade. It's casting a shadow from the pole where it's being held. So if I move that light further away, that shadow would get narrower. But it's not really shining through the fabric that I wanted it to. So this is where, like I said, I may have to go through and make some edits. So I'm going to come back to my floor lamp. I'm going to go into my material, and under fabric here, let's see here. I want to make sure that I hit the correct thing. I'm going to go to this. I'm going to try this opacity level. And so I'm going to change the transparency from black to kind of being a medium gray. So maybe something like that or so. And I might also have to adjust it here under diffuse. Let's try. That one's definitely changing it. Let me go back to this transparency. I'm going to go back to being just black. And under this opacity, let's say 0.8. I want a little bit of transparency, but not too much. It might be 0.9. Like I said, this is somewhat trial and error. Okay, so I have a little bit of transparency in that. I'll go ahead and I'll close it. I'll save this. So I'll go to File and then Save. I'll jump back to my sample scene here. I'll go to Edit, Blocks, Block Manager. Maybe. There it is. My floor lamp, there it is. We need to update it. Sorry, wrong one. That one. Replace existing material, apply to all because I edited the material. All right, and now we can go ahead and give that one a render as well. So again, I said this was a little bit of trial and error on my part because it's the new version, so I just am trying it out. It already, by that square, it already looks promising. The key is always how transparent you make the shade, because if it's too transparent, you don't get enough of the shade itself. All right, there you go. So that looks pretty good. So it takes a little bit of playing around with it. Now, I could also change this shade to be a different color, and that would cast the light different in a different color. So if I went back to my original here, I went into my V-Ray, and I said, you know what, I want to use the, I need some kind of a ridiculous color here. Go back to the plain fabrics. Those were working pretty well. Sure, why not? Let's use the red. All right, so there's my red fabric. I'm going to right-click and say apply to the shade. And then over here where I adjusted that diffuse, there, opacity right there, I changed that to 0.9. There we go. So that's set at 0.9. If I save this now, and I jump over into this scene, and I go to Edit, and then Blocks, and then Block Manager, I can update that floor lamp. It's going to ask me to replace the materials. I'll say apply to all. Perfect. And then I can go ahead and do this render again. Now this time, the color of the shade, being different than the light itself, is going to change the light that's being cast here. So it won't be as red. At least it shouldn't be. Or it shouldn't be as yellow. I don't know whether you guys can see it, but I can already see a little bit of a pink tint to it. So the point is, the material you choose can impact what the light looks like. I didn't change the light bulb color. I could do that too. But in this case, I kept the light bulb the same. I just changed the shade material, and that then is, as the light passes through that shade, it's going to change the color of the background. One of the challenges with doing these kinds of demos is there's always waiting. You know, when I let this render, it's going to take a little bit of time. I don't know how much you guys can see the red. Yeah, you can see a little bit right in here. Right in there and right in there. As if that were a red lampshade rather than the yellowy tan lampshade. So anyway, that's the point for how you would go about doing it. So I have other options too. So those are the first two. Now, if I'm going to see the light bulb itself, let's say I was doing a wall sconce or something. If I'm trying to see the light bulb itself, then I might actually have to model the light bulb. But in something like this, if there's a shade that's semi-transparent, I'm not actually seeing the bulb. I don't have to worry about doing it. Sometimes people model a fixture, like a wall fixture or something that has a glass case, and then you see the bulb inside. That takes a little bit more work because you have to be able to model the bulb as well as the glass case. Sometimes there's issues with glass and how it renders through the glass. That's kind of an individual basis. Depending on what you make, I may have some suggestions for ways that your light might look a little bit better. The last thing that I'll show you today, before I let you guys start to work, is how you might mimic something like neon or a tube light or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into my floor lamp here. I'm going to save this and then create a new file. So let me go ahead and create a new large object inches. All right, so I'm going to work in the top view for just a second here. I'm going to use the text tool to create some text. So let's do, I How about 135? The height is in inches here, so if I wanted it to be maybe 12 inches tall, there it is like that, and it just creates a text object for me. To make this nice and smooth, I might do a fillet with a radius of, oh, I don't know, let's try a 1/2 inch and see what that looks like. Yeah, that's good. So I'm just going to round over the corners. All right, that's rounded over. I guess it should be 136, huh? How about we just do the 3? Sounds like a good plan. Okay, so I have my 3. You can tell where I'm going with this. I'm going to sweep it. So I need the cross-sectional curve. I'll create my circle here. Not quite sure where I want to start it. Let me turn on my midpoint snap so I can snap to the middle. Now I need the diameter of the tube here. Let's do maybe 3/8. There it is. Let's look at this in the 3-dimensional view. I need to stand that one up on end, so rotate 3D. And we'll stand it up on end. It may need a little bit more rotation for the sweep. Let me turn off ortho here for a second. I'm just going to try to get that nice and perpendicular to the line like that. Now I can do my sweep. So this is going to be a sweep 1. There's my rail. There's my cross-sectional curve. There's my seam. And now I have the neon tube. Go into shaded mode like that. Okay, so I created the neon tube. I need to stand it up. So let's first move it there to 0, 0, 0. Rotate 3D. So that it's standing upright. I might also move it away from the wall just a little bit. So let's go maybe 1 inch. Like that, just so it's standing off the wall a little bit. Okay, so now I have the neon letter itself, but I need to think about the materials of this. Obviously this is going to glow, so it's a perfect opportunity for an emissive material. So I'm going to change the default layer here to be neon. And then the rest of these don't matter because there's not anything else that I'm creating other than the neon itself. So I have the neon. I need to go into my V-Ray asset editor here, and I'm going to create my emissive material. I don't think they have any emissive materials already in here. I didn't think to look. Various. Nope, doesn't seem like it. Okay, so we'll go ahead and create a new emissive material. So I'll click on the new material icon and then choose emissive. Same thing here. We have to go through and change. This time on my color, remember I had my color here from last time, right there, the 200, 161, and 82. If I change to that, I'd end up with a kind of yellowy color. Well, chances are in neon I don't want the yellowy color, I want some kind of a bright color. So instead maybe I'll pick some kind of a bright color. So we'll pick a nice bright color, maybe something like that. There we go. My transparency here was 100. Perfect. So those are all set. And my intensity value is going to vary because I'm going to use this to make it glow. So I'm not quite sure what it's going to be yet. I'll start at maybe 50. And we'll see how that looks long term. It's turning out to be nice and pink there. Okay, so I have that emissive. I could even rename this to be neon. All right, so there's neon. I'm going to go ahead and apply that to my neon layer. Good. I'll jump over into, oops, wrong class. There we go. Oh. There. Let me save this. I'll go to File and then Save. I'll call this Neon. Save. Perfect. over into my night scene. There it is. I'm going to create a new layer so that these objects can go on that layer. And I can turn them off. Then I'll bring in the neon. So I'll go to Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance. There's my neon linked as a reference. And we'll go ahead and drop it there. This time I need to move it vertically so that it comes up on the wall a little bit. We need to move it over so it's on the middle of the wall. So now that I have that there, we can do our first test render of what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and render it. Wrong button. So we're getting a pretty nice neon glow for that, which is good. The challenge with neon is we're doing the emissive to create the light so that we see the tubes. The problem is, if you guys can't see it particularly well, but on the screen, and when you guys try this out, you'll discover that it ends up oftentimes being very blotchy, the rest of it, because the emissive material by itself isn't really enough light. So this is where we can choose to install another type of light. I told you today we're going to concentrate on point lights and spotlights. The truth is that a rectangular light is a better light for this choice because we can put the rectangular light right behind where our neon is and then have it shine. That's what I'm going to do. The problem with a rectangular light is it's not as scripted in terms of values. So I can tell you to create a spotlight or a point light, set up the watts, and then it's going to show up like a 60-watt bulb or a 100-watt bulb or whatever. When we create a rectangular light, it's based on the wattage over the size of the rectangle. So depending on how big the rectangle is, we're going to need different wattages. So it's usually a little bit more trial and error. I'm going to go ahead and create the rectangular light corner. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can create this here. Let's do it at 1 foot. And I'm going to have to orient this, so we'll do this one also at 1 foot, like that. So this little light here is my rectangular light. I need to do some rotating. So let me rotate 3D so that I can stand it upright. I need to do another rotate on it so that it rotates around, like that. So on a rectangular light, we have the rectangle, and we also have an arrow that points in the direction that the light is shining. So I have the rectangle, I have the direction it's pointing. I'm going to move this. I need to turn on my point snap so I can make sure I get to it. And I'm going to move it up so that it's near where my neon is. But I'm also going to make sure that, just like before, it doesn't actually intersect the object. So it's behind the object there. So now, with that rectangular light selected, I can go back into my light properties. I can edit in the V-Ray asset editor. There it is. And we can go through the same options. So first thing is under intensity, we'll leave it set for 30. But under units, I'm going to change to my radiant power watts. There's one other thing, though. Under options, I need to make sure that it is checked for invisible because I don't want to see the rectangle itself. Double-sided would be if you want it shining in both directions. In this scenario, I'm not sure I want it shining in both directions. I'm going to try it out and see. Now, under color, I have to figure out what that kind of magenta-ish color was because that's what's going to be shining the light color itself. So I'll pick that color approximately, and we'll give this a shot and see what it is. Like I said, rectangular is not as scripted. It's a trial and error as you look for it. So let me switch over into that render 1 view, and we'll give this another render and see how it turns out. Yeah, I can already tell that the glow is significantly better. It's hard for you guys to see. Let me increase the power of that to see if you guys can see it a little bit better on the projector. It's going to be too strong on my computer, but on the projector it might be a little bit better. You can start to see it in here. Yeah, you guys can still barely see it. On mine, it's like everything is pink. But anyway, I'm using that to create the light for this particular piece of neon. So I'm using that rectangular light. I wasn't planning on going into rectangular light, which is why it's not written out in your handout, but it's kind of appropriate for this style of light fixture. So what I'm going to ask you today to do in your exercise 220 is to think about where you might end up placing lights in your scene. Think about what those lights would look like from a geometry standpoint. Build the light, the fixture, the geometry to hold the V-Ray light. Once you have that, save it, download this sample night scene, bring that file in, and set up a V-Ray light. It's really important for you guys to know that when you save your Rhino file and you bring it in as a block into another file, if you put a V-Ray light into the block, the V-Ray light will not transfer through with you. So your light, your V-Ray light, is always put in the final scene that you're doing your rendering. So on your retreat, for example, that scene with the background and everything that we've been doing our renderings from, that's where the V-Ray lights will end up. They won't end up in the blocks. So they always end up at the end stage, at the final stage of the renderings. And that's just something that's really important to get practice on. Okay, so today, maybe create 2 to 4 lights, geometries. Explore how this works. Today's our day to play around with stuff. So try out lights, figure out how the lights are working, sort out what's working, what's not working,